Alright, so I've put in about, I would say 20-ish hours, 22, in Zenless Zone Zero so far. I've completed up to Chapter 2, I've done all the side stuff that's shown up so far, even Hollow Zero multiple times, and yeah, I got some thoughts. Now I know I'm kinda late on this, people have already beaten all the available content and there are entire reviews out, but I started playing later than most people, so give me a break. Now for some background and context, my experience with MiHoYo games is limited. I think, with Genshin Impact, I put in about 2 days at launch before I decided, it's not for me. And with Star Rail, I put in a bit more. I think I put in close to 2 weeks. That wasn't at launch though, that was a few months back. So my experience with their games is limited. However, my experience with action games is a different story. I love action games. The Devil May Cry franchise is one of my favorites. I love the Bayonetta series. And last year, Hi-Fi Rush was excellent. Until Xbox decided to take their huge Matt booty and just shit all over that studio. With that background in action games, I do have some perspective to give here, I guess. I don't know. That being said, I do need to keep in mind that this game was also made with mobile players and people who haven't really played action games but love MiHoYo games in mind. So I'll try to judge it fairly, I guess, from that perspective. Also, I have not spent a dime on this game. I am a free-to-play peasant and will happily remain so in my dumpster in the corner of the shopping mall. So with that being said, let's get into it. Now I'm going to save combat for last because that is the biggest chunk of my notes compared to everything else. And I guess I'll start with the obvious, what my eyes can see. And what my eyes see is that this game is beautiful. Like straight up, this game is fucking pretty to look at. If your eyes work, you probably feel the same. Now even though my experience with other MiHoYo games is limited, I could already immediately tell that the characters in this game were way more expressive. Also their models, I don't know if this is true, but their models also seemed a lot more high fidelity. Or at the very least had a lot more intricate pieces to them. Like I noticed a lot more clothing deformation and other things like that, including secondary animation. Sometimes things can be a little over-exaggerated, but I think it's to the benefit of the game's tone. Like things are not that serious here. It's like most other action games where everything is over the top and exciting. So I give that stuff a pass, even if some people think it's like, I don't know, too anime or too over the top. There was a cutscene I saw early on, like after you do Hollow Zero for the first time, with this cat girl with a samurai sword. Holy shit. And on the topic of secondary animation, there's a lot of, how do I put this? Floppage in secondary animation. Like people's clothes flop around, characters' other parts flop around. Don't look at Nicole's model at 3 a.m. It definitely adds to the aesthetic, but it's also pretty noticeable. Speaking of aesthetics, the urban aesthetic of this game is much more up my alley than Genshin's or Star Rail's. And that's not to say that Genshin and Star Rail look bad or that I have a problem with sci-fi or high fantasy. It's just that, running around the city, doing odd jobs, eating noodles, drinking coffee, and then
stomping Koopas.
And for an action game, in a similar vein to like Hi-Fi Rush and Devil May Cry, hell yeah, the aesthetic is perfect. The music also fits. It's a mix of hip-hop, EDM, and trap music. I don't know if there's ever been anything similar in like Star Rail or even Honkai Impact, but I do enjoy the music. The fucking character pulling theme when you're doing the gacha is stuck in my head when it goes blah, 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 blah. I will say people tend to, how do I put this? Glaze MiHoYo's music, absolutely just suck off their soundtracks. And the music is good, don't get me wrong. But, I don't know. The amount of reverence I've seen for their soundtracks is almost like a cult. One criticism I've seen online that I don't necessarily agree with is that people say the colors look washed out or desaturated in certain areas. Even if that is true to an extent, the reason's kinda obvious. If the colors were super bright and saturated, with all the particle effects and flashing going on, you would fucking die or your eyes would explode. So they kinda do need to tone that stuff back when making a game like this. Moving on from aesthetics, the story. The premise of the game is that you are a proxy, a hacker slash information broker slash, I guess, agent manager. From what I remember of my 2 days of Genshin and my much longer 2 weeks of Star Rail, the setting seems a bit more grounded than the other two. Now I know I'm saying this in a game with fucking giant bear men and shark girls, but you're just kind of going about your day-to-day life doing odd jobs for people. It's kind of a vibe. I will say, the plot, like I mentioned, you just going around day to day doing your odd jobs, is a little bit slow going so far. There are a few mysteries sprinkled in here and there, like how Fairy is this weird mysterious AI, and there was that weird vision of the siblings at the start, and I don't know, who hacked your fucking MySpace account. If I'm being honest, the plot hasn't exactly hooked me yet. Not to say it's bad, I don't think it's bad at all. It's very, I don't want to say Saturday morning cartoon. I think Monster of the Week would be more appropriate. You go from place to place, you find out about an issue, you meet some new quirky characters, and you get shit done. It hasn't exactly gripped me yet, but I don't hate it. That being said, and I actually think this is a new feature for this game, you can skip cutscenes. I don't think you were able to do that in Genshin or Star Rail. I think you had to just mash through. I think that's a great addition. Now, you can't skip through the animated cutscenes, but why would you? They're fucking amazing looking. But when you do decide to skip dialogue or whatever, the game gives you cliff notes of what the conversation was basically saying. So even if you decide to skip something you deem as unimportant, you'll have a vague idea of what's going on. But yeah, the progression's basically just been hey, you're hanging around, you get a phone call from some chuckle fuck who's like, hey, I heard this rumor that if you piss in an alley at 5 in the morning, a monster will show up and eat you in the hollow or whatever. And you're like, alright, I'll send Billy and Nicole to go shoot it. On the topic of the quirked up characters though, everybody is pretty zany. Except for Anby. And that fits the tone and the aesthetic of the game. You're trying to be stylish and do action game shit, so you need characters with equally stylish personalities. Yes, aesthetics come first, but you also have to give them defined personalities so that the fan base can latch onto them and excuse all of their evil deeds in their 10-page Twitter threads about how they're actually a really misunderstood, innocent character, and if you hate this character, you're fucking racist. I don't know why I said that. And also, speaking of zany characters, I really like the fact that the protagonists in this game have actual names and defined personalities. Yeah, Wise is the boring one and Belle is the little gremlin character. But from what I recall, well, I know for a fact, Star Rail, your protagonist only ever talks during combat and weirdly during one mission earlier on in the game. But in Genshin, I don't remember your character talking ever again. Now granted, again, I only played that game for 2 days, so I could be dead wrong on that. That being said, I do wonder if certain characters are going to get on my nerves. I don't know how else to phrase it. I just have this worry in the back of my mind that somebody is going to grate on me. And that somebody might be my favorite character to play as, actually. Look, Nekomata is really fun to play as. I use her on pretty much all of my comps just because she is fast and she beats ass. Now that being said, she can be a bit,
Did you call me? Meow.
Quirky. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the whole catgirl shtick. And I know somebody's gonna be like, well, just play it in Japanese or Chinese and it'll sound less awkward. And that might be true, but if I play it in Japanese or Chinese, even if it sounds less awkward, it's going to be more pronounced. Now that being said, even though I find the catgirl shtick quirky, I want that Virgil character Miyabi. But moving on from all of that, it's time we get into the meat of this video, the combat.
Doing it well.
And right off the bat, the game is fun. It is fun. It is simple, but not in a bad way. You can just pick up your controller, mash some buttons, have some fun, look at some flashy shit, and then put it down for the day. And I know I just said you can mash, but there are a lot of mechanics that shake things up if you're looking to be either stylish or to challenge yourself. Some of these mechanics are universal, but some are broken up between characters, like timed button presses for certain characters, charge moves for certain characters. It all depends on who you're playing as. Also, enemies have some unique mechanics too. They have elemental shields where you have to use the corresponding element to break them. Certain enemies, mostly just bosses and elite enemies though, have attack patterns you actually have to memorize and mix up between parrying and dodging. So if you want to look cool in this game, you actually have to think. If you want to get by, mashing is just fine, but if you want to be stylish, if you want to be fucking Dante from Devil May Cry, you have to use that noggin of yours. One thing I will say that kind of surprised me about it though, is that there's no air launchers or air combos, which I found surprising. Most of my favorite action games do have launchers. Devil May Cry, Bayonetta, Hi-Fi Rush had a launcher. And I'm not saying not having a launcher is a bad thing, but there are some moves in the game that seem like they should launch, and they even do on basic enemies like Anby's EX Special. It's not a big deal, it's just something I noticed. On the topic of dodging and parrying, the game has both perfect dodge and perfect parry. The perfect parry, referred to in game as perfect assist, I really enjoy, because you actually call out one of your other characters to block the attack for you, and they're the ones who go into counterattack. It really emphasizes the fact that, yeah, you have 3 characters and you're working as a team. I like it. The windows for perfect dodge and perfect parry are actually really forgiving once you've seen how the enemies attack. Like at first, I thought, oh, these windows are pretty tight. But after about like 20 minutes of playing, I was like, oh, wait a minute, I'm actually reacting to a lot of this. Now that could just be because I'm a fucking gamer nerd, but for someone who's new to action games or really likes MiHoYo games, I could see them finding the window pretty tight. As it stands right now, my favorite characters to play as are Nekomata, Anby, Billy, Nicole, Sukaku, but kind of because I have to, because she's my only ice character. And I just got Grace recently, and I'm looking forward to using her for her gameplay and her personality. So from the characters you've seen me use, you can probably tell that I just like to go fast and beat ass. As mentioned earlier, I kind of have to use Sukaku because she's the only ice character I have, and I will talk about the elemental skew in a minute. But I do like that I am, for the most part, able to use characters I enjoy. As things went on, I started paying more attention to like the recommended elements for each mission. And for Hollow Zero, you kind of have to use the recommended elements if you want to get things done efficiently. But I do worry that I will get screwed by the element system later, especially with how skewed things are. Let me explain. Just by looking at the character list right now, and I could be wrong on these ratios, but I see 4 fire characters, 4 electric characters, 3 ice characters, 2 of which are S ranks. And Nicole is the only ether character, I think? Correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, it kind of sucks that right now, if the game recommends that I need ice and ether, I really can only use Sukaku or Nicole, and I'm worried that I'm going to get screwed later on. Also, there are character roles like defense, stun, attack, and support. I'm gonna be real, I don't pay attention to that shit at all. Like, the only tank character I unlocked was Ben. I haven't touched that motherfucker. What do you think this is? Okay, I go fast, I beat ass. I'm not gonna stand there and just block and then use my weak ass counter. That's not to say I don't like Ben. He's a giant bear motherfucker, but you know, it is what it is. But you know, for my playstyle, where I'm like zipping around all over the place, perfect dodging and perfect parrying, I cannot imagine playing this game on mobile. In fact, if you are a mobile player or you tried this game on mobile, please let me know how the experience is. This seems like the type of game you need a controller for. Now, I only recently got to the point where you have to start, you know, unlocking the relics, I guess, or the discs for your W engines. So far, it hasn't been too bad. Like, I unlocked the feature that lets me get them. But I am worried because that's kind of what put me off of Star Rail, was the need to grind for these relics so that your characters can keep pace. Now this is an action game where stats, while they do matter because enemies do become spongier later, they don't matter nearly as much as an RPG like Star Rail, but I am worried that maybe that will push me away from this game again if I have to start balancing that along with the elemental system. Yeah, that's starting to creep into the back of my mind, but we'll see. Also, in terms of difficulty, this game, at least for me, someone with experience in action games, is pretty easy so far. Obviously, I can imagine that, you know, if you're a fan of MiHoYo games but you haven't really played a Devil May Cry or Bayonetta, you'd find this more difficult, which is understandable. After Chapter 1, you unlock the ability to play old missions again on hard mode. And after trying it out, it seems like the only major difference is that the enemies might hit a bit harder, but they are definitely a lot spongier, and I'm not really a fan of that in terms of gameplay design. Now, allegedly, by the end of what's currently available, things actually get pretty difficult, so I'll see once I get there. I will say, the most difficulty I've had in combat so far is when I purposefully challenged Hollow Zero under level. I was like 5 levels under level, and I was like, yeah, I'll just see what this shit's about, because mainly wanted the rewards, because again, I am a poor free-to-play player. And so when I challenged Hollow Zero 5 levels under leveled, it was kind of just a slog. Like, the bosses were hitting really hard, don't get me wrong, but once I got their patterns down and I was dodging everything, it was like, oh my god, it was moving at like a snail's pace. Like, their health bars were taking no damage. So yeah, recommend that you go into these things at the appropriate level, or at least a few levels off. Hollow Zero is good though. One of my favorite things about Hollow Zero is getting 2 extra bang boos and then having your third, and then just watching them beat some enemy's ass in the corner while you're doing a combo. In terms of energy, because yeah, this is a gacha game, they gotta limit you somehow. It seems like energy gets used up a lot faster in this game, or the costs are a lot higher. From what I remember in Star Rail, I could do like, I forget what they're called, calyxes or whatever, multiple times, like upwards of 10 maybe? Now that might be a bit too steep, but you get what I mean. But in this game, it's like, yeah, I can go to the HIA and do my runs like 3 times and then I'm out. It's like I'll come back later or recharge. And you know, I'm not spending my polychrome on that, so I guess I just gotta wait. It is interesting how limiting it feels though. I am wondering if it's just a me thing or if it's purposeful. In terms of level design, it's nothing crazy. You go from area to area, your linear hallways. During the rally missions, there are some switches and some light puzzles you need to do, which I will bring up later because it has to go in with the whole exploration thing. One major complaint I have, I wouldn't say major, but it's probably the biggest complaint I have in terms of combat, is the camera and enemy sort of positioning. When you're fighting like multiple enemies who are either fast or boss enemies who you need to keep track of, the lock-on can be really finicky and they can end up behind you, and then you won't be able to see what they're going to do to attack. You can hear the sound cue and sometimes you can rely on that, but sometimes I'll be fighting an enemy and out of nowhere I'll just get dinked from behind by somebody I didn't even know was there. So yeah, sometimes when I'm switching targets with the lock-on and I'm trying to keep track of like the boss, it doesn't work right. I don't know if it's just a me thing, but let me know if you've experienced anything similar. Now, on the topic of exploration. Exploration is split between like 2 different modes. You have your overworld, hub world exploration where you walk around, you know, you do your dailies, you talk to people, you drink your coffee, you eat your noodles, you take creepy pictures of cats. The thing I'm kind of conflicted on is the Bang Boo Net exploration thing. I'm just gonna call it the TV thing. The TV thing, you basically go through these panels simulating kind of like you exploring the area. And so you walk around these tiles, almost like a, I don't know. I wouldn't say it's Fire Emblem, but you kind of just move around from tile to tile, collecting items, getting into battles and that sort of thing. And I don't know why it's there. Like, I know why it's there. From a gameplay design standpoint, it's to break up the monotony of just doing combat over and over. But I'm wondering why the exploration itself isn't actually in the levels like other games like Devil May Cry or Hi-Fi Rush. You could even incorporate the puzzles. In fact, they do that, like I mentioned before, in the rally missions. Before I got to the rally missions, I thought it was a limitation of them being on a mobile game, right? But then after I did the rally mission, even with the load screens breaking things up, it still worked. It felt more natural to me. So I am curious why they did it, if it was just purely for the aesthetic. Because don't get me wrong, it is visually pretty interesting to look at, but I am wondering why they didn't just have everything in the level, you know what I mean? But yeah, those are my thoughts and impressions of the game so far. I think it's fun. You know, relatively it's simple, but if you're trying to be stylish and cool, you can do some pretty sick shit. Even now, I still jump on just to hit some buttons sometimes, either practice with a character, do a couple missions or whatever. I am wondering how long the game will hold me for, if I'm going to continue playing it for a long time. I imagine I'll just finish what's currently available so far and then wait and see. As it stands, again, I mentioned earlier, Nekomata is my favorite character to play as, along with Billy, Anby, and Nicole, which is kind of funny that like the 3 characters that give you for free are the ones I'm enjoying the most. In terms of longevity, you'd have to ask like other MiHoYo fans, I guess. I don't know how they see the game so far. I was just giving my perspective as an action game fan. That being said, if you've beaten all the currently available content or you're farther in the game than me, let me know. Let me know how it changes in terms of difficulty. Let me know if the story gets any crazier. I'd love to know. But yeah, that's all from me for now. Thanks for watching, I guess. Bye bye.